This story is from Matt Aldrich. Title name, Invaders of the Storm. This storm's really gonna be a doozy. Clarence didn't even look up from his cigarette as Joel muttered that sentence for the third time. He'd already seen it coming on the diner's TV screen. News radar showing a giant red and green mass moving into the Olson County as the blonde weather girl chatted about it.
Once again, all residents are advised to seek shelter as the storm has the potential for near hurricane-force winds and a high chance of tornadic activity. Folks, this may be the big one.
Yep, a real doozy, Joel repeated, leaning back in his seat at a counter. The waitress came over and refilled his mug.
We're closing up shortly, then I'm getting out of town,
she said. Yeah, me too. My wife's packing the essentials right now, Joel remarked. I've weathered some storms here before, but this one I'd rather not be around for. He swiveled a stool towards Clarence. Hey, you sure you don't want to come with us? It would be no problem. Clarence smiled through his graying beard.
I appreciate it, but I'm staying here. Mother Nature ain't gonna throw me off my land, and I've got a duty to my property. And I've got a storm shelter if things get hairy. This ain't my first big storm.
Alright, if you say so, Joel said as he finished his new cup. He placed some bills on the counter and returned a blue cap to his balding head. As he pushed open the glass exit door, he turned back to Clarence. Hey, take care, friend, and good luck. Clarence nodded goodbye and watched Joel through the window as he got into his beige station wagon and took off down the road. Clarence left the diner a little later, looking up at the sky while he tossed his finished cigarette into the grass bordering the asphalt parking lot. Chunks of black clouds had begun to move in. A breeze had picked up as well, swaying the power lines above the road like a child on a swing. A few drops of rain had already trickled down on the windshield of Clarence's blue pickup truck, growing more frequent as he drove away from the diner and towards his own home. He only passed one or two other cars, and they were heading the opposite direction, probably the last of the evacuees fleeing the county. Clarence looked across the field of grass, stretching out towards the horizon. It would have been easy for him to turn around and follow them, to hide until the storm passed. He was never one for easy, though. Tornadoes, floods, and everything between. He stuck through it, all of them. Why should a storm be any different? As Clarence turned into the dirt driveway, his house came into view, standing defiant against the darkened sky. The only house for at least 2 miles, and nothing but grass and crops in between. It was a modest 2-story farmhouse, with a wooden porch in the front and 2 metal doors leading to a storm cellar on the right side. Clarence had painted it blue and white the day he moved in. Although time had faded the colors, the house stood strong with the work he put in. Clarence could feel the wind strengthen even more, rain droplets pelting his face as he creaked up the wooden stairs. His tiny yard windmill was frantically spinning in the attempt to escape. The porch swing he screwed together a few years before was creaking back and forth as if to join it. He slammed the front door against the wind and locked it. It was time for last-minute preparations. Clarence had it down to a routine at this point. Secure both screen doors, shut all windows, make sure nothing outside was loose enough to be thrown. He checked twice that the storm cellar key was in the back pocket of his jeans. When all was done, he opened the fridge and pulled out a beer. Nothing left to do but hunker down and wait. He took the beer into his living room and plopped down on his recliner. As he cracked open the can, distant lightning flashed through the window, followed by a crash of thunder a few seconds later. storm was closing in, alright. Clarence clicked on the TV, which immediately showed the same news report that had been shown at the diner. He changed the channel. Enough already. A man in a suit with a strange hairstyle appeared, theorizing about the ruins of some ancient culture.
Beast called it the Thunderbird.
The power cut off a half hour later. Clarence groaned when it didn't immediately pop back on. He had a backup generator, but it seemed like something was wrong with it every time he tried to use it. Rain was slapping against the living room window. Going outside during a massive storm wouldn't be the smartest idea, but Clarence supposed if he hurried, he can get the generator working in only a few minutes. Besides, it was covered by a makeshift wooden shed he had built over it. He took his gray rain jacket off the hook near the doorway. Nothing would go wrong if he was quick. The wind nearly threw the door back against the wall as he opened it. Clarence pulled it shut and looked out at the walls of water pouring down on his property. A steady stream was gushing out of the pipe that was attached to his porch, splashing into the already drenched grass. The sky was a black veil of menacing clouds that stretched farther than Clarence could see. He'd had to suck it up and get wet, or sit in the dark until it's over. A little rain never hurt anyone anyway. Holding the hood of his jacket over his head, he ran over to the side of the house towards the tiny shed housing the air conditioner and generator. Immediately, a gust of wind threw him backward, and he managed to catch his balance. The storm was strengthening. Finally, he reached the generator and dug under the overhang. It wasn't enough to completely protect him, but it was at least dry enough to work. Clarence began to examine the metal box. Hopefully it would be as simple as patching some wires. A flash of lightning followed by a huge clap of thunder made him jump. It sounded like it was right on top of him. He scanned the sky for funnel clouds, but found none. Then, he heard another sound. It was an amplified gargle coming from directly above him. Clarence peered up through the rain. Had that really come from the sky? It didn't sound like any storm noise he had ever heard before. It sounded almost animalistic. No animal he knew would be up that high in the weather, or make that kind of strange noise. What Clarence saw next shook him to his core. As he looked up through the pouring rain, he found two bright orange orbs staring back at him.
What the hell?
He breathed, frozen in place. It had to be a hallucination or a trick of light. To Clarence's horror, both thoughts were proven wrong when what the orbs were attached to emerged before him. Out of the clouds slithered a monstrous, worm-like creature about the size of a bus. The orbs were indeed eyes, attached to a massive, gaping maw lined with saliva-covered white fangs. Its pale body wriggled across the sky and let out the shriek again. Reminding Clarence of the pig squeal if the pig was submerged in water. If Clarence had taken a second longer to process the reality of his situation, it would have been fatal. He dove aside just as the worm lunged down at him, with the fangs bared. Instead, it crashed through the shed, tearing into the wood and scattering splinters across the yard. The thing then curved back towards the sky, riding the wind and the rain through the air like a kite. Awful liquid noises echoed around. Clarence slipped through the mud. The only thought in his throbbing head is to get back at the house before the nightmarish thing can make a second pass. Thunder and lightning continued to crash as he crawled back into the porch. Not caring how soaking wet he was, it was there that he realized something even more terrible. There was more than one. Gargled squeals filled the air as they came out of the dark sky. 5, 10, 15 at least. All wriggling around the clouds like a batch of earthworms through a garden. Clarence knew he would go insane if he looked too long. Suddenly, he was through the front door and collapsed to the hardwood floor in a puddle. What was he gonna do? What could he do against whatever was happening outside? An old television quote from some show crossed his mind. Mankind can't best nature. It'll always have new surprises to show us on how small we are. His shotgun, he kept on the wall in his bedroom closet in case of an emergency. Maybe it wouldn't do much to those things, but it was better than being unarmed. Clarence threw off his jacket and rushed towards the stairs. God, were they landing on his rooftop? There wasn't time to wonder. Throwing open his closet door, he grabbed the shotgun off the mount and the shell box he had sitting underneath it, loading the weapon with shaking hands. As he was checking his aim, more thuds reverberate from above. The rain pelting against the bedroom window was suddenly blotted out by a dark shape. Clarence saw a flash of teeth just before the glass and wood started to shatter in. Shards scattering across the carpet as the entire wall gave away. A hideous mouth struggled through the hole, those bulging orange orbs fixated where he stood. He raised the barrel with his heart pounding, pulled the pump, and fired into the oncoming worm. The blast made it recoil. Clarence fired again, this time causing the worm to utter a pained squeal and slide back out through the gaping hole in the room. Clarence didn't think he did any real damage, other than scaring it off for the time being. The weather was in, wind and rain invading his home and tossing room contents around. It wasn't safe to be there. Clarence shoved a few remaining shotgun shells from the box into his pocket and headed to the door before any other monsters could find their way in. He shut it behind him to at least keep some elements out. As he ran back down the stairs, he could hear more of the squeals circling from outside. Reality finally hit him back like a brick wall. What the hell was happening? Monsters. Not just a monster of a storm, but actual beasts were surrounding his home. From the sky. Was this some form of God's wrath? A punishment, perhaps, for his own stubborn ego in defying the storm? Maybe Clarence should have fled like the others. Maybe he should have left with Joel when he had the chance. No. This was his land, goddammit. His house that he had used his own two hands to turn from a shack into a well-respected home. Nothing was going to force him to run.
You won't be me.
Clarence whispered through gritted teeth.
Not even with this demon storm.
He charged into the living room. The unfinished beer still sat on a table next to the recliner. Clarence downed it, listening to multiple thuds smacking against the roof, followed by the sound of shingles sliding away. Visibly through the window was blocked by the steaming walls of rain. Has the storm itself even peaked yet? He had no way of knowing without power. Even time is lost now. Clarence knew if he had just hid there, the creatures would eventually crash their way in and overwhelm him. Unless he made the first move. That would mean going to the top of the roof. Exactly where they told you not to be during a massive storm. A necessary risk. It was either cower in fear and wait for the inevitable, or fight to defend himself and his home. For Clarence, it was no contest. On the second floor, there was a hatch that led to the attic. Clarence pulled it open and climbed up the ladder into the cramped room. Boxes of stored junk had been tossed around from the force. He saw massive cracks running along the wooden foundation, but nothing had breached yet. Another pounding from above shook the room. A cloud of dust falling from the ceiling. It wouldn't be able to take much more. Clarence scrambled up the small ladder in the corner of the other hatch, leading to the roof. With all his might, he pushed it open and stuck his head out, immediately being pelted by rain and wind. Huge cracks had formed through the structure of the roof. Black sky stretched to every visible horizon, and Clarence could see a malicious cloud tendrils reaching towards the ground into the field across the street. A possible tornado. Hideous squeals cued the more immediate problem. The creatures seemed to be in every direction, some writhing in the clouds above, others gliding so close that their churning saliva was audible. Clarence ducked as one barreled towards him and curved back up, slamming the massive tail into the roof. Everything shook. He climbed fully outside and fired at it. A near miss, nearly down and balancing on the slope. He began to load another shell. As he clicked it, a gargle came close from behind. Clarence whirled around and found another great beast sliding towards him from the opposite side of the roof. It lurched forward, massive body ripping apart shingles and crashing through where Clarence had been standing only seconds before. The open attic hatch ripped away and was devoured by those horrible teeth. Clarence was trapped outside. Bright orange eyes, as big as cars, fixated on him. He would have been swallowed whole if he didn't do the only desperate thing possible: shoot into one. The eye popped as the blast hit it. Thick liquid spraying from the wound. A pained squeal erupted from the worm, and Clarence fired again, this time directly down the throat. The squeal cut short. It became a gargling sound. It had been hurt, that was certain. Once again, Clarence pumped the shotgun and fired into the putrid mouth of the beast, making the worm thrash around, setting more cracks into the structure. All at once, it stopped mid-spasm, the limp body rolling past Clarence and off the roof. Shaking from the sopping cold rain clinging to his body, he uttered a victorious cry. Mankind had struck once against nature. The celebration didn't last long. All that noise had drawn the attention of the others, gathering in the sky above them. That wasn't the worst of it. Across the fields, the howling winds had churned together to finish forming a black funnel cloud. A tornado was heading straight towards the house. Clarence was a sitting duck. As he reloaded, he racked his brain for some kind of quick plan. Were there enough shells to kill all the beasts? He doubted. The only thing he could do to continue his defense, try to minimize the damage to the house, to hunker down and fight until the oncoming twister forced him off the roof.
This is not the end.
Clarence decided he would survive the storm and protect his home from the invaders. After everything was over, he rebuilt stronger than before, just as he always did. Nature could throw whatever it wanted, monsters and all. God wouldn't take him, not like that.
You won't beat me,
he whispered through gritted teeth. Taking aim through the raindrops, Clarence calculated which of the worms were close enough to shoot at. He couldn't afford to waste any shells. as one got within range. He fired at the newly discovered weak point, one of the vulnerable eyes. He couldn't see if he made the shot count, but a shrill squeal confirmed the damage done. The worm made a sharp turn back into the air. It slowed down, searching for the source of the attack as Clarence flattened himself against the roof to try to blend in. Then the worm passed over him. He rolled onto his back and fired at the other eye, but the bullet only grazed the skin below it. The head of the beast whipped around, and Clarence found himself staring down a mouthful of glistering fangs once again. Instead of charging him, it did something worse. It squealed, longer and louder than ever before. Clarence knew it wasn't a random noise. It was a call to the others. In a panic, he reloaded again and fired at the worm, causing it to retreat back into the sky. Too late to stop the alarm. Clarence looked up as they came. More and more glided out of the clouds, many of them already gazing down at where he stood. His defensive spot had been exposed. The tornado, meanwhile, had intensified and was close enough for Clarence to feel the tug of the wind strengthen. He'd done all he could. There were mere seconds to decide what to do before the storm overtook his position. Shooting his way out wasn't possible. All he could do was escape back into the house, where he could gather himself and think about the next move. He glanced towards the gnarled hatch, where the inside ladder had collapsed under the worm's weight. Could he lure himself to the attic floor without breaking any bones? 5 worms had already descended within 100 feet. Leaving no time to consider other options, he charged towards the hatch, gun still in hand. It wasn't fast enough. One of the worms came down like a freight train and slammed through the wood right in front of him. Sending a violent tremor through the roof, Clarence tried to regain his balance, but the brain had slickened the surface, and he slipped off his feet. For a terrifying moment, he was tumbling down in a blurred frenzy. In the corner of his vision, he saw something solid and grabbed it. His fingers latched into the bricks of the chimney. Then he was hanging for dear life as the water flowed onto him, and the thing circled around even closer. The deafening squeals seemed to come from every direction, as Clarence's grasping arms shook and his eyes began to tunnel. All he could do was hold on. Just hold on. The shotgun had come to a stop at the chimney as well. Catching on the opposite side, reaching it would be impossible, even if he had the strength. Clarence could feel the rough wind cutting at his skin, and knew the tornado was almost at the doorstep. And those damnable worms were coming again. 2 gliding above him, tilting their heads as if using the stronger winds to add precision to their aim. Clarence dug his fingers into the brick until they almost bled. Water poured down his arms, the fingertips slipping into the moisture still. He screamed. He screamed for survival. Screamed against nature and these beasts in the sky. Screamed for everything he held dear in the world. Then, like someone flipped a switch, his arms gave out. Clarence fell. He tumbled off the roof and onto the smaller one covering the porch, rolling until he landed on his back with a wet slap into the muddy lawn. Every nerve in his body exploded into pain as he lay there, unable to move. Endless rain pelted him, and Clarence felt as though he would drown. The funnel cloud had reached the other side of the yard, ripping the power lines out and scattering debris. All Clarence can do was watch as it took the house. He watched as the porch began to quake. He watched as the worms became battering rams and tore more holes into the roof than he could possibly patch. He watched as the storm and monsters knocked his house apart, the porch collapsing into a heap and parts of the foundation ripping away into the spiraling winds. He witnessed his divine punishment carried out. Mankind can't best nature. Clarence waited in the mud. It would only be a matter of time until the worm spotted him again and finished the job, or the tornado finally suck him up and break him for good. He was beaten. He closed his eyes and waited for death. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the howling wind. Clarence opened his eyes again. The sound was a screech coming from the black clouds above. It came again, louder. A sudden flash of lightning caught his vision. He gasped as another flash revealed a massive shape moving through the darkness. The coming shape was much bigger as further lightning crackled across the sky. Clarence squinted. Into his belief, he saw a pair of wings emerging from the thick layer of clouds. It'll always have new surprises to show us how small we are. The new creature was a gargantuan bird. Soaring through the air, bolts of lightning sparkling across its wings. Gray feathers whistled in the wind. Sharp talons underneath glistening as it flew. Uttering another cry, it shot like a sparkling bullet towards one of the worms and snatched the beast with its beak. The worm squealed as it was sucked in and consumed. Clarence looked in bewilderment from the ground. He's seen this entity before on one of his TV shows. Legends and statues of it from Native American tribes believe that it served as a guardian against evil spirits. What had they called it? The name came to him in an instant. A Thunderbird. He watched the bird grab another worm with his talons, dragging it through the air like a rag doll. Was it on his side, or just on a hunt? Whatever it was, it had given him the chance that he needed. He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain, when he noticed something shining in the mud. A key. The key to the storm cellar. It must have fallen out of his pocket when he hit the ground. If only he could make it before. Something slapped the ground beside him. It was a huge chunk of meat, dropped from the clash happening in the air. Clarence had to get to the shelter or be killed by debris after everything. He began to crawl, dragging himself through the mud and the rain as the world seemed to rip apart around him. Flashes of lightning, the swoop of the enormous wings, shadows on the ground from the monsters and the clinging wetness, all flooded every sense he had. His strength was fading. The mental and physical fatigue was setting in like a cruel joke. At least he laid his hand on cold metal. He gripped the handle and pulled, falling backwards as pain shot up his back. The metal door clanged open. With gritted teeth, Clarence used the last of his energy to hoist himself up into the wooden steps leading to the cellar. He looked up one last time as he tugged at the door latch. The Thunderbird streaked across the sky, another worm dangling from its beak. Lightning cascaded across the wings. As the shining eyes met with Clarence, Clarence saw intelligence, power, and fury in those eyes. In that moment, he was afraid, but knew deep down that there was no malice in this creature. He heard his saving grace cry out again as the door slammed and everything turned to black. Time melted away. He may have passed out for a while, but he could tell for sure. Nothing seems real anymore. All Clarence knew was that he snapped awake when he heard shouting from outside. Not more creature noises. They were from people and calling his name.
Clarence! Clarence! Are you here somewhere? Clarence!
One voice in particular sounded familiar. A moment later, the doors flung open and sunlight poured in. At the top of the stairs stood 3 officers in tan jackets and a man in a tatted blue cap.
Joel.
Oh my God, Clarence! Joel rushed to him. Oh my God. Are you okay, buddy?
Joel.
Can you move? One of the officers joined Joel and helped Clarence sit up. The other 2 began a call for ambulance, and a quick one. It wasn't long before they had him in a stretcher and carried him outside. He squinted as the new light hit him in the face and saw that devastation was everywhere. His house lay in ruins, roof caved in, and porch collapsed. Windows were shattered. Pieces of wood lay strewn across the yard. There was no evidence, however, of any giant worms or birds. Hey, you're going to be okay, Clarence, Joel said. Thank God you made it to the cellar. I didn't know if we were going to find you alive after seeing what that monster storm did. Man, I'm sorry about your house.
It's alright.
Clarence breathed.
I guess Mother Nature done give me another chance.
The ambulance arrived as they slid an oxygen mask into Clarence's face. He looked out towards the horizon. The sky had calmed to a bright blue with wispy white streaks of clouds. It almost gazed back at him, and Clarence found himself with new respect. A new gentle breeze as the ambulance pulled away, but this time, it was a gentle one. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe. And I want to give a huge shout out to Horror on the Rocks for playing as Clarence. You did fantastic. Great job. And that's the end of the video. Thank you so much.
Good night. Farewell. And remember, don't get lost in the dark.